Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. It is time to do my 2024 reading wrap up. I think I'm always one of the last people to do this because I always have to wait till January to do it as I'm always on vacation. But in any case, here we are. It's time to wrap up all the reading that I did in 2024. So let's get started. I ended up reading a total of 31 books. When I mean books, I mean anything that's just basically not manga, which I'll mention at the end. So I read 31 books, where 5 of the books were nonfiction, 26 books were fiction. I really didn't read that much nonfiction this year. I had the intention of reading a lot of nonfiction this year, but it just didn't happen. That's okay. However, on good side of the news, I didn't have any DNFs this year. There were no books that I was disliking so much that I figured I would stop reading them, although I did get pretty close with 2 books. Backlight by Kanji Hanawa, if it weren't a short story of 50 pages, I probably would have DNF'd this one because I didn't really see the point of it. And also I did struggle with The Alienist by Machado de Assis. Again, if this hadn't been a 90-page story that I had brought on vacation with me to the Philippines, where basically like it was read that or nothing else, I might have DNF'd it. So, but I was able to avoid that, and I was able to pull through and not have any DNFs in the year 2024. So that's good news, right? It's good news. In terms of what I read, there were 12 new to me authors that I read and 16 repeat authors. Which I'm always kind of surprised because I always feel like I'm reading the same authors over and over again, which is good. That means I like authors enough to want to continue and read more of their works. But sometimes I feel bad that I'm just always talking about the same people, the same books over and over again. I mean, you know, variety is good. Variety is good. But I still managed, I think, to get a good, it seems apparently that I managed to get a good balance between new to me authors and repeat authors. I ended up reading 11 books in French, so I'll show you those. I ended up reading 11 books in French, okay? Then I read 14 books in English. 3 of them are not included in this pile, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 5 extra books that I read in English, not here. Okay. These are some of the books that I read in English, apparently. Let's see, what else would there be? There'd be War and Peace. There'd be the 2 Robert Louis Stevenson books that I read in English. What else did I read in English that's not included on this list? Did I lie to you guys and I put 14 even though that's not real? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have no idea. What did I read? I mean, I have to admit this year, if I'm just going to tell you some of my like broad thoughts about the year, it's like, it's not the most memorable year of books that I read this year. I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's really not. There've been better years. Oh yeah, The Alchemist. Yeah, I hated that. War and Peace I liked. What else did I read in English? Did I just, oh, I have no idea. Maybe I just made up that stat for no reason. I can't tell you. No idea. But we're going to go with it. 14 books in English. And then I read, the more exciting thing is I went back and read 6 books in Japanese. So very exciting because, as we all know, 2 years ago, I read quite a lot of books. I read, I think, I want to say either 9 or 11. I can't remember which one it is, but I read either 9 or 11 books in Japanese because I was in a Japanese reading book club. And then last year, the book club, we decided to just give up. And then we ended up reading, I only read 1 book last year, I think. So this year, I went back and started reading again. So I read 6 books, and then hopefully I'll read even more in 2025. But I was very excited about the books that I read this year in Japanese. So that was very exciting. I ended up reading a total of 10,124 pages of this year, which is fascinating because that means I read just 1 page off, but I read the exact same number of pages as I read last year. which is crazy because I read a lot more this year, and I definitely read longer books this year. But there is an explanation as to why, even though I read more this year, technically I had the same page count as last year. I mean, the answer is the manga, but we'll get to that. But yeah, so I read 10,000 pages, which is roughly about 27 pages a day. That's not really true. That's not really a true fact because I didn't really read that much in January. I read pretty much nothing in December. And so really when I was actually reading, I'd say I was actually reading about 50 to 6 pages a day on the days I was reading. So either I would read 50 to 60 pages a day or I would read 0 pages in a day. So that's kind of more of how my reading style goes. But if you were to count for you every day, it's about 27 pages a day. But it shows you don't need to read that many pages a day to read a lot of books. Or even though I read a lot of long books this year, like War and Peace, it just shows you can get a lot of big chunksters done with not that much reading in a day. So that's always very exciting. Speaking of chunksters, my longest book is obviously War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy at 1,440 pages. I really thought until I really thought until I read that the second half of the year that my biggest book would be Middlemarch by George Eliot, because this one is 939 pages. This one I took me about 3 months to read. I think I read it from like the month of March to like May or June or something like that. So I really thought this was gonna be my longest read. It definitely felt like a longer read than War and Peace. This is definitely a lot more difficult to read than War and Peace. War and Peace is very easy to read. And that one is very, very quick and very like pushes you forward versus Middlemarch. But yeah, War and Peace, it won. In terms of shortest books, if you're allowing me to count this, even though it's a short story, but it is a single tome, so it is a book. This was 50 pages. The next shortest book that I read was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This is a book I very much respect, but I have to admit that I didn't agree with everything in it, and I didn't get the feeling, the amount of emotion I wanted to get from this book. And then the third shortest book, because I did read some short books, a lot big too, I guess because I read a lot of long books, was also Les Ninis at 90 pages. So I read 3 books that were smaller than 100 pages. Let's see, let's go with publication date. The oldest book that I read was the play. Where is the play? Was the play Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme by Molière, which is from the year 1670. So basically my oldest books are always theater because I'm catching up on the classics. I'm reading a lot of the plays from the 1500s, 1600s, etc. So this one's from 1670. And then the newest book I read, which is actually not so new. I really didn't read any modern books this year, especially since I didn't read any of the newer publications in Japanese that I own. I really should have, but I didn't. But the newest book that I read was But You're Still So Young, How Thirtysomethings Are Redefining Adulthood by Kayleen Schaefer. This is a book my sister-in-law wrote. So I read this so that I could get a feel for what she writes. So I read this. This was published in 2021. So you see, like, I mean, in the publishing world, this is already technically quite old. But that was the newest book that I read. In terms of getting books off my TBR pile, so that's important, right? We don't want to buy books just to not read them, and we don't want to get like distracted by all the shiny new things. Like if we read books, it means we wanted to. If we buy books, it means we wanted to read them. So it's very important for me that I do read these books, So I'm very happy because the oldest book that I read on my TBR pile was from 2011. At the same time, it's kind of like unfortunate because I really enjoyed this book. So it's unfortunate that it took me so long to read it. But it does feel very good to get a book that old off my TBR pile. And that is La Bête, Aveugle, or The Blind Beast by Edogawa Ranpo. So Edogawa Ranpo is one of the most famous crime thriller detective writers in Japan, and I'm only recently starting to actually read him, even though I've owned this again for so long. It's now 2025, so I've owned this for 14 years now. It's a really long time to keep a book without reading it. Another book I'm very satisfied to have read this year was, this is a book, again, I bought in 2012, but this one's actually more embarrassing. This is Vingt, après, 20 years later, from Alexandre Dumas. This is more embarrassing that I hadn't read this because, one, I had actually already read like 300 pages of it once before. But that's not even the very embarrassing part. The embarrassing part is that this is the second book in the D'Artagnan romances trilogy. So D'Artagnan, if that rings a bell, Three Musketeers. So the Three Musketeers saga, this is the second book. So you have the three, in the French version, you have the Three Musketeers, Les Trois Mousquetaires. Then you have Vingt, après, so 20 years later. And then you have Le Vicomte de Bragelonne. So the Vicomte of Bragelonne, exactly the same in English. However, in English publications, typically this third book, Vicomte de Bragelonne, is split up into more books. So Louise de la Vallière, The Man in the Iron Mask, and then like maybe a third tome, depending on the publication. So it's either split in 2 or 3. And the thing is that it's embarrassing that I hadn't read this because I've read The Three Musketeers and I've read Le Vicomte de Bragelonne, but I had never read the middle. That you could actually read them separately. Obviously, it's better to read it chronologically because you're not... because the characters are the same, they're just getting progressively older as the series goes by. But reading the third book did not in any way disturb or prevent me from enjoying this second book. All I did reading this is made me want to reread the whole series over again because I love the D'Artagnan series, the Three Musketeers, and all the characters, Porthos, Aramis, oh my gosh, Porthos, Aramis, oh my gosh, the third Musketeers, Porthos, no, I just said that already. It's not going to come to me. How awful. That is terrible. In any case, the Three Musketeers and D'Artagnan, the whole series, the characters are absolutely amazing. And so yeah, this, not only was this from 2012, but it was also from a book that technically I've already read the around books, and I never read the middle, which is really weird. But it is what it is. But I'm really glad I read this because I absolutely love this book. This was so much fun. Three Musketeers is so much. Dumas is just so good, but it's so good. So in terms of reading books off my TBR pile, I ended up reading 10 books that I purchased in 2024. So that's good. I buy a book, I read it, and it doesn't like dwell, and it doesn't linger, and it doesn't grow mold. It doesn't start changing colors, you know? The book doesn't start turning yellow and things like that. So read it, happy. I read 7 books that I bought in 2023. For 2022, I bought 1 each from 21, 20, and 2019. And then 3 books from 2018 and 2 books from 2016. And then again, those 2 books that I just introduced from 2011 and 2012. So we're slowly but surely getting books off the TBR pile, but we could do better. But it's good because a quarter of my reading, so 8 out of the 31 books I read, are older than 5 years old. So even though I've bought a significant amount of books, at least my tastes haven't changed, basically. I'm still enjoying all those old books. So I think for me that's really good because it means I don't have to feel so bad about buying new books. Because I think a lot of people buy so many books that they can't get to the old ones anymore, and by the time they think about the old ones now, like they've already evolved, their tastes have changed, they've grown older, so what they used to read is not what they currently read. But I don't have that situation. Basically what I used to read has stayed consistent to what I read now, so that's good. Like I'm safer, you know, I'm safer. So, but still, quarter of my reading was books 5 years and older, so I feel really good about that. However, I did I did haul a lot of books this year. I have to be honest. I did haul a lot of books this year. But like my count is kind of weird because usually when I count physical, I usually count my books onto my TBR when I do the entry date into the computer. But the thing that messes up is when I do Christmas, I buy books over Christmas, and then usually I'm not able to enter those books until I'm home. So it's usually the next year by then. And so the thing is like, well, I bought them in Christmas, so technically the books are from the previous year, but the entry date is from the new year. So which year should I put it in? And this was kind of messing up my TBR totals because last year in 2024, I think I added the 2023 Christmas books to my 2024 TBR list, which makes it seem like I bought a lot more books than I actually did. But in any case, I decided to leave it as is. And then my 2024 Christmas book haul, I decided to leave in 2024 and not have it in 25, even though I entered the books in 2025. So it means that I've bought 57 physical books in 2024, which is a lot considering that I've read 31 books. So I nearly doubled my reading rate, which isn't ideal, because now I have quite a big TBR pile, more than I would like. I'll get into that. But so the thing is that I bought 57 books in 2024 and 51 books still remain from that. So I bought books, but I didn't really touch them. So that's the data that I'm not really happy with. But we'll work on that this year. We'll work on that this year. In terms of books that I bought in 2023, I had bought 46 books in 2023. 17 books remain from there. So we're doing better there. I am, I'm reading. So it'll be okay. It'll be okay. Out of the books I bought in 2022, where I bought 58 books, 28 remain. So I'm going to have to look at 2022 and see what happened there. Why are so many books remaining? It might be the year where I bought like pretty much all of the Zola books and all the Verne books. That would make sense because I'm not going to read like 20 of those at once in a row. But 2021, I bought 62 books and only 15 remaining from 2021. So we are running the TBR pile. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. So the TBR at the beginning of the year for my Spanish books was 3. It remains at 3. I didn't read anything in Spanish. Japanese is the only place I went down. I started off with 37 books and I went down 34 books. And actually behind the scenes, I even got rid of a few books that I decided I'm just not going to read anymore. So I'm happy about that. I'm clearing out some books that I just don't need to be there anymore. French, however, I started the year off at 88 and now I'm up to 110. That I don't like. In any individual language, I don't want to be above 100. I have a lot of books in French. I need to read them. So that's a number I definitely want to have go down in 2025. In terms of books in English, at the beginning of the year, I started off with 52. I ended the year with 66 again. So my total number of books at the beginning of the year was 180. Right now I'm at 213, which means if I read the same amount of books that I read in 2024 this year, I'm just going to go right back to 180. It doesn't seem like I'm going to make that much progress. So I think I need to push maybe a little bit harder, try and make a better effort. Okay, so we're up 34 books, even though I only read 31. Not the best, but we'll work on it. We will work on it. All right. In terms of the publication date of which I read my books, 14 were published between the years of 2000 and 2024, which I'm always actually surprised because I always feel like I read more older books. But I guess because of the nonfiction and the Japanese books I'm reading, that pretty much right away puts me at a more contemporary date. So when I actually look at the data and I compare it to what kind of books I read, it does make sense. But I did read a lot of classics. So 5 books came from the years 1950 to 2000. Only 1 book from 1900 to 1950, which for me makes that sense because at least for books in English, that is not my favorite era of reading. like 1920s, 30s, not my favorite. World War II books, unless I'm reading a book about Japan, World War II books, Holocaust, all of that stuff, it just doesn't interest me anymore. I already know too much about that subject. I've read too much about that subject. I've watched too many movies about, I don't go watch World War II movies. I'm not interested in Oppenheimer because I'm just tired of it. It's just a topic that's, although very important for newcomers, for me, it's just overdone. So it's not really an era I read much. However, 1850 to the 1900s, which is when a lot of the big French classics come from, that's a big era for me. So I read 8 books from that era. From 1800 to 1850, I read 2 books, and then I read 1 book pre-1800, and that was the theater play that I mentioned earlier. Now, for the next stats, they're going to look very familiar. The countries I read from, includes nonfiction. I read 11 books from Japan. I read 7 books from France. I read 4 books from the USA, 3 from England, 2 from Brazil, 2 from Scotland, 1 from China, 1 from Russia. Now, Japan, France, and USA being at the top of the list, that's pretty much always the same. Japan and France, I'm French, I live in Japan, and I'm also American, so having the USA tagged on, that's just what's going to be. That's my prime zone of reading. I am, however, disappointed that I only have 1 book from China. I am very much interested in China lately. I've been wanting to read all their classics. There are so many more books I want to read about them. I have so much good nonfiction about China that the fact that I only read 1 book in 2024 that involves China, for me, is very sad, because I have such good books waiting for me that's just not acceptable. That's just not acceptable. So I want to do better with that. All right, let's get into some fun stuff. The best cover is, I have 2 books actually. I have 2 books that I thought were the best cover. The actual best cover, my favorite book was, okay, no, can't knock over my computer, was, of course, at the bottom of the pile. My favorite cover in Japanese was the cover for the very final book I read in December, which is called Irui Kon Intan, The Exotic Marriage, by Motoya Yukiko. I just love this cover because the fact is the title is about, the direct translation, the title is The Tale of a Marriage Between 2 Species, and the fact that you have a marriage, traditional Japanese marriage of 2 creatures getting married together, it just beautifully evokes the story. So I thought that this one I really loved. In English, I love the cover of The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. I think this picture is absolutely stunning. I think the tension you can see between his eyebrows just really properly evokes the tension within the essay that is included in the story. It also just incredibly evocative image that just sort of really shows you like the emotion of the time. So I really love this cover. And then my favorite bind up has to be Our Story, A Memoir of Love and Life in China by Pingru. This bind up is gorgeous. This is a nonfiction. It's basically just Pingru's memoir of the relationship between him and his wife. So the actual book cover is like this. And then here, this isn't printed. This is actually textured. Like this, what you're seeing, this is not like printed on the spine. It's actually the binding of the spine is exposed, right? And then you have this part, which is connected to the cover in the back. It's the same red paper, but the exposed binding, I think, is stunning. And then the end papers. So on the front end papers, you have the couple when they were young, and then the end papers in the back are them when they're older. And then the whole memoir itself is gorgeous because it's he both wrote the book and he illustrated the book, right? So it's just absolutely stunning having his illustrations accompanying the text, because they're just very lovely and very evocative, and really just shows you what's going on so really well. So it's a really great visual of what you're reading. So I love that. So this was my favorite bind up of the year. I don't really have like a most disappointing. Do I have? Well, this book was pretty disappointing. This little backlight kanji hanawa. I didn't really understand the point of this book. I didn't think it needed to exist. The short story. It was just. I'm very interested in the publishers, the writers of the cool minis. I'm really interested in what they're doing, their mission statement, stuff like that. But this particular story just didn't do it for me. I also, the Machado de Assis, unfortunately, La Alienist, the Alienist, also didn't really do much for me. After I really had loved the posthumous memoirs of Bras Cubas, I was surprised that I wouldn't react to another Assis so as well as that one. So definitely gonna have to try again with him. I do have his other book, the Don Casmuro. I've definitely had better expectations of that one, but I was sad that this one just didn't do it as much for me. I struggled with this one. I don't think everyone will struggle with this book. I just personally did. A Japanese book I didn't really care for much was the Ankoku Joshi. I didn't care for this one as much, which was unfortunate because I really liked the other book I read by her, which is called Stable. That one was such a strong book. It was such a good thriller. It had such a good twist to it that this one was just, it just felt, although it was well done, it's just the topic and the angst of like high school girls was just, it's just not my thing. I just didn't really care for it that much. In English, Trouble with Lichen. I struggled with this one hard. I read the first 200 pages in like the month of January, and then it took me 7 months to read the last 20 pages. It was ridiculous. So this one also disappointed me because I've really enjoyed John Wyndham's works up to now, and this one, Trouble with Lichen, it just lost its plot midway through, and I just didn't understand the message he was trying to pull anymore, especially when you compare it to the blurb in the back. I was just like, I'm not sure I agree with that. Other than that, all the nonfiction I read, Missoula, John Krakauer's Rape in the Justice System in a College Town was fascinating, really good. Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann, the Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI was excellent. My sister-in-law's book, not my style, but still interesting. I'm glad to have read it. Let's see, the Chinese Memoir was absolutely beautiful. But again, I didn't really read that much nonfiction this year. I definitely want to read more in 2025 because there's some good stuff on my TBR pile that's waiting for me. Should we get into my favorite book? Unfortunately, I don't have favorite books. I'm always jealous of like other booktubers who have like a separate video just for their favorite books. They're like my 10 favorite books of 2000, etc., or my favorite 20 books. I'm like, wow. I don't have that. I have 2 favorite books of the year. These aren't new overall favorites. If there was a 5-star scale, if I ever told you guys the rating of the books I give, which I never do because I think those are always very subjective. But if 5 stars was one of them, these 2 books still only have 4 stars. I didn't have any 5-star reads really. Nothing, like no new overall favorites this year. But the favorite books of the year, I have 2. The first one is Vingt, après, 20 years later by Dumas. Completing this trilogy was just a dream come true. The humor, the plot, the writing, the suspense, the adventure, everything was so perfect. Revisiting these characters was so much fun. I loved every moment of it, and and this was a killer way to start the year, which is ironic because the other book that's my favorite was the last book of the year, and that was this one, The Exotic Marriage. So these, I sandwiched the year with these 2 excellent books, and I'm so glad to have read this because this one, the writing style, the way she brings out all that tension, that frustration, her use of magical realism to really just show the absurdity of her situation. She killed it with the short story An Exotic Marriage. Again, there's a reason why I won the Edogawa Prize. it's just an absolutely killer read. So good. So like, and I had other books that I was like, I'm happy that I've read, that I enjoyed reading. Planet of the Apes, killer, absolutely loved this one. Really happy to have read it. It's so good. It's just so good. But I mean, overall, like, even though I enjoyed pretty much everything I read for the most part, if you asked me to like list every book that I read in 2024, like in a month, if you asked me what tell me every single book you read in 2024, I would struggle to tell you what I read. So very good, happy to have read everything, but just not as like not as impactful, not as punch worthy as what I usually have in a year. So that's it. Now I did say I would briefly mention the manga, because the thing is that, like, I did tell you earlier that I've read 31 books, but I've read the same page count as last year. But the thing is that I read a lot this year. And the reason I read a lot this year is because I read a lot of manga this year. Like, a killer amount of manga this year. And that is going to be a separate video. But I want to tell you that I read 133 volumes of manga this year. So when I tell you I was reading every day, and when I tell you I was tired of reading, it's because of the manga. I was reading 133 volumes. And especially if you compare that to the amount of manga I read last year, which was 21 volumes, I read 6 times more manga, even though I had the same page count for books, right? So that is a huge increase. So I am so happy because I killed it with the manga. I absolutely killed it. I did so well. I did so well. My manga TBR is just like, I had 615 volumes on my TBR. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, this is why this statistic is killer. Because I had 1,615 volumes of manga at the beginning of my TBR, and now I'm down to 487. 413 if you only count the books that I actually own in Japan, because I do have some TBR left in US, I just don't have access to them. But yeah, 487 books left, doing so much better, especially because this year I only bought 8 volumes of manga. That's it. 8 volumes of manga, that's it. And 4 of those I've read. And one of them I only bought because I lent my Sailor Moon series to a coworker, but it was missing 1 volume, and so I bought it so that she could read the series in completion, and then so that I could read the series in completion. But yeah, like, I only purchased 8 books a volume, and I read 4 of those. So killer, so good. So yeah, 31 volumes, 31 books, and 133 volumes of manga. So technically that's 164 books read in a year. This is why I separate them, because manga is so much easier to read than a novel. But 164 volumes of reading material in a year. That's crazy. That's more than I've ever done. So I'm very happy about that, very excited, very proud of myself. I feel like, and I enjoyed myself. Like, that's the main thing, right? Like, I enjoyed my reading. I did get tired towards the end because I was reading so much. I'm not used to reading so much. But especially the Japanese, like, reading so much Japanese, like, forcing myself to read manga every day was huge for helping my Japanese. Like, it really made me just want to read more and more. It's why I read the 6 volumes of the 6 novels in Japanese, because reading the manga just made me want to read more and more. So yeah, very exciting, very happy with 2024, and I'm intrigued. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in 2025. Like, I'm really curious. I have a lot of good books on my TBR. There's still a lot of manga I need to get through. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm really curious. Anyway, I'm going to end it here. You will see my manga wrap up later on. I don't think I'm going to do that right away. Thank you so much for being a supporter of my channel. Thank you so much for being in, showing me so much encouragement in 2024, for commenting. I've loved reading everybody's comments. It's one of the things I look forward to every time I post a video, is to see how you guys react and see what you guys comment and what you guys relate to. Like, that part is really fun. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.